Welcome to the latest episode of Politely Pushy. I am your host, and today I am really excited to bring in our guest, Joya Dass. She has had a long career in multimedia, in business news, in journalism. She's been doing this for about 20 years, but in the last few years, she's been running her own leadership business. She's helping people become the best versions of themselves. She's doing it through events. She's doing it through her media background, her video background. So I am going to bring in Joya right now. Joya, it's a pleasure to have you with me. And I know you're on the go all the time. You're traveling right now. Tell me, where are you today? Where are we talking to you from?
I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, the brewery district to be exact. My boyfriend's nephew is getting married tomorrow, Friday. I think the rehearsal dinner is tonight. The wedding is tomorrow. And so I just flew in yesterday, and I prefer my life to be a little bit on the go. I can work from anywhere. We've all learned that in the last 18 months, but I like to see how the other half lives. I know that everyone who lives in New York loves to be New York centric, but I will always have a home there, but I definitely need to see how the other half lives.
So tell me, just like in a nutshell, explain what the current business is, because you've gone from employee to business owners, you've gone from employee to business owner, you've gone from someone who's taking orders to now someone who's helping people be the best version of themselves. How would you summarize in a nutshell what it is that your company is now?
My company was truly born out of a personal pain point in my life. I was born to Indian immigrant parents who had very concise scripts on how girls were going to live their lives. And I was not into that. I was born here. My sensibilities are very Western. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a television anchor. I'd known it since I was since the age of 4. And so when I announced to my parents that this is what I wanted to do, they said, well, we're not behind this. And so I left.
What did they want you to do? Was it doctor, lawyer, engineer? What did they want you to do?
Well, first they wanted me to get off and get married to some Indian guy, but they also then wanted me to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. Doctor was, I think, the first thing they said. My dad was like, "Oh, you're going to be a gynecologist," and I was like, "I absolutely have no interest in science." But it was less about like the profession. It was more about the control aspect. And the thing is that I just had vision since I was a little kid. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and no one was going to persuade me otherwise. So I left home at 18. I paid for college by myself. I paid for graduate school by myself. I paid for every move around the country to come to New York and do exactly what I wanted to do since I was 4 years old, which is to become a TV anchor. Now, here's the important part that leads back into my business. I had no role models. I had nobody that I knew in the industry. I had to network my way into the industry. And because of that, at the 10-year mark of my career, I realized that nobody teaches this stuff. Nobody teaches women this stuff. And then once you learn it, where do you go to practice it? And so I was like, I'm just going to create that space for this brand of conversation to happen, because I can't be the only Indian girl that has her sights set on something else besides getting married off like chattel. And so if I create that space where I know that I can have a conversation, you can have a conversation, we can talk about our ambitions of being a CEO or COO and really develop that, what could that actually mean? And the only way I knew how to drive programming is doing what I did on the stock exchange floor every day, which was interview either the opening bell or closing bell CEO. Who better to learn from than somebody who has a publicly traded company, has demonstrable business success, and has a whole board of shareholders that they have to, a board and shareholders that they have to report to. So it's been 10 years now that I've been running this leadership platform, but it was truly just born out of that fact that I was on my own trying to forge a very high profile career as an Indian woman, and figured that maybe some other people needed this too.
One of the big things that you're focused on right now is video, in terms of branding yourself, marketing yourself. So how have you seen the change in video for individuals who are trying to create a personal brand and create their own personal marketplace?
Think about Howard Stern. Howard Stern was not just on the radio, but he was also on TV doing the same exact thing. I feel like that was the first that he really started to brand himself in a different way. And now we've come leaps and bounds where everybody, if you have the faculties and the means, heck, you can just, use your iPhone and you can make a video. So I feel like the evolution has come so far because so much of the technology is now available in your smartphone. So I think about, I got a drone the other day. I can't get the thing to work.
Why did you get a drone? Are you going to film yourself with a drone now?
I'm turning 50 next year. I chartered a yacht in Croatia and I want to get aerial footage and I don't feel like I need to hire a Croatian crew for this. I just want to be able to do it myself. But I'm saying I couldn't get the damn thing to work. And so I had to go on YouTube and pull up videos for that make and model of my drone in order to figure out how to get the thing to work. So I just think about companies, little companies like that are branding themselves in that way. At the end of the day, like I just need the thing to work. I got an espresso. All of a sudden, the thing that pushes out the foamy milk isn't working anymore. I had to go to a video. I think that a lot of companies are realizing that this is the true and tried way for people to be able to understand the products and services that they're purchasing from you better. And so to me, I think that anybody and everybody can brand themselves now if you have the moxie and you have the courage to be able to do a video.
But not everybody does.
Not everybody does.
They don't have the courage. They don't have the moxie. They're afraid of whatever technical skill is required. You and I know, because we worked in the media, it's not that hard. But if you don't know what you're doing, you don't have that experience, you can make yourself look really bad really quickly, and it's hard to recover from that.
I think it's something else, because now, you know, as part of my leadership platform, I teach public speaking, and I find with women especially, it's not even so much about the courage. I mean, that's one factor of it, but it's also the organizing of the content. They'll just go on and on and on and on and on and realize that people's attention spans is what, 3 seconds, 15 seconds. They're going to turn you off. Get to your point. But I don't think that that's something, you and I know that because we've spent time in television and we had to say everything in a minute, 20 seconds. But I don't think the general populace gets that.
A minute 20. I remember when I first started at CNBC, typically we got 90 seconds. We got a $1.30 to tell our segments. And every year or so, that minute 30 was a minute 15. And then it was 60. And then it was 45. And then it was basically 30. So by the time I left, there were a lot of segments. It was, hey, you've got 30 seconds. I'm like, geez, 45, that's a lot. Can you try to keep it tight? And I remember people who had been there years before me, they said, you know, when I first started here, we got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I need 2 minutes to tell a story. But it's funny to think how it's the opposite of inflation, right? It's, you just keep losing time. We're going to be down to, you know, what was TikTok? TikTok was originally 15 seconds. Like, you need to be able to tell it all.
Is where it's at now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about this, I know, in a second, but 15 seconds is where it's at. That's where the action is. You've got to be able to coagulate all of your thoughts and say it in 15 seconds.
Which is harder. We know it's harder to talk less than to talk more.
Yes. Yes. All the detail goes out the window.
Yeah, exactly. No one knows any detail anymore. But so how are you teaching people in terms of video, setting their brand apart? How does doing video consistently help them get a brand out? And are you working with people that are just individuals looking for jobs? Or are you working with companies trying to set their brand? Because maybe those are two different pieces of advice.
No, I'm working with the solopreneur. I'm working with the, you know, single entrepreneur who
so
is
they are
baffled.
The business in themselves is the same thing.
And they're at an inflection point. They're at an inflection point and they're realizing that videos, reels, TikToks are the way that other people are breaking through, and they really need to be able to do that. But where do they start? And so I teach women today on how to do that. But there's really one really like straight, like to cut through all the noise and all of the confusion and the overwhelm. I basically am teaching storytelling. I teach a framework for storytelling because nobody else is ever going to lay claim to your personal story. Whatever medium you use, whether it's Loom, Vidyard, your phone, a high quality camera, all of that is fine. But if you don't have compelling content, no one's going to be listening.
You mentioned a couple of things I want to get to right away. People are spending a lot of money. They think they need fancy cameras, fancy equipment, but we've seen it's all about the compelling content. You can do it on a cheap phone, right? You can do it. I mean, this is an expensive phone, but like a cheap phone relative to camera quality, the phones are not the best cameras, but the content is what has to be compelling. So are you advising a lot of these people, these solopreneurs, where they're investing too much in the wrong things?
I sit in front of my membership all week long. I did a call this morning at 9 a.m. and everybody wants clients. At the end of the day, they got to eat and they need clients. And they're wondering, how do I bridge the gap between the content that I'm creating and how do I get a calendar full of people that want to get on discovery calls with me? And I'm like, the market differentiator for you is for you to not only tell a story, but then what is your understanding of that story? 5 things I learned from adopting 30 days of meditation. 5 things I learned because I screwed up the last time I did a marketing campaign. What is your understanding? Because I don't care who's consuming that content. They could be making donuts. They could be selling kittens. They could be, fixing transmissions. But at the end of the day, if they want to market and brand themselves, what is it they can take from your material and transplant it and go away and use it? And that's the part that I think people give short shrift to when they're doing videos.
Do you think there's an issue where a lot of people think they have to make an advertisement video as opposed to what we see on TikTok nowadays? It's more of an experience. Like you said, here's what I've learned, or this is my experience doing it, or here's something that's happening, or let me just have some engaging content that has nothing to do with my business. But if enough people watch it, they'll click the bio, they'll want to learn more about me, and then I'll get some business. So do you find that you're teaching people, hey, don't make it an overt advertisement, give me some real content that's useful?
You've got to be adding value, or you've got to be entertaining. Now, I'm not going to be twerking, so that's not what I'm teaching, but I'm saying that you've got to be able to add value to the person that's consuming your content. Look, the best brands in the world, and you and I know this, the best brands in the world make the consumer feel good about themselves. So what are you doing to help the person who's on the other side of that camera feel good about themselves? And the only way, the conduit by which you do that is by adding value or entertaining. You
say that, and the name that comes to mind right away to me is Coca-Cola. You think about those ads. It's like, oh, that feels good. I want to drink that. It feels like a fun community to be a part of, to have this sugary beverage.
Yeah. Or Nike, or, I was just talking about, it's been very controversial, but Jay-Z and Beyonce just did an advertisement for Tiffany's.
So I saw that. That was a really different ad. I saw that. I'm like, this is weird. That was my first impression. Like, what's going on here? This is so over the top.
Well, there's three things, right? Tiffany's has acquired one of Basquiat's paintings for an insane amount of money. It appears at 40 seconds into the video. The second thing is that Jay-Z's hair is an homage to Basquiat. And the third thing is that they're really making a statement about the fact that they're going after a different audience. Beyonce is the first African-American woman to wear the Tiffany diamond in that commercial. But at the end of the day, they're trying to tell a story. They're being very overt about who they're going after. And they're not exactly being subtle about it, right? They're telling you that they want a different audience. And we are putting up these icons, the 1% of the 1% of the African-American population, to tell you that we're doing that.
Right. So like going back to the creating value or being entertaining. So when you're looking at some of the stats on video consumption, how have you noticed the change over the last few years? I mean, we all know it's getting bigger, but I'm sure in your own research for what you're working on, you're probably noticing some details in the trends that maybe I haven't picked up on.
I do a lot of things on Vidyard because for my students, I'll do a quick video and then I'll just punch it out. And Vidyard's great because it gives you a little thumbnail in the video and you just got to send it via email. Vidyard said that adults, at least in 2020, spent 209 minutes a day watching TV video content, but half of that was actually on some kind of a device. 103 minutes of it was on some kind of a device. So that means that they're not necessarily watching, the evening news. They're watching Succession on HBO. They're watching, 9 Perfect Strangers on Hulu. So they're watching and they're consuming content, but they're consuming it on different devices.
So how does a normal person compete with that? How does the solo entrepreneur that you're working with, how do they compete in a world where, okay, I can go on my phone, I can go on TikTok and watch your amateur video, or I can watch professional quality stuff from Hulu and HBO?
I think number one, you've got to be able to tell your own story. There's 1,500 yoga teachers out there, but what is it that makes you unique or what makes you different? There's a gal that I'm teaching right now who works in an ER at a Harvard Teaching Hospital in Boston. That is a really stressful job. Nobody can speak more to what yoga and meditation has done for her than somebody who's on the front lines treating you when you come into the emergency room. So that is an important story to tell. Otherwise, you're just another yoga and meditation teacher. Number two, I think you have to be consistent and be willing to play the long game. People think that, oh, well, I did 3 videos, no one responded, no one liked it, so I quit. No, you have to go in with like a 10-year vision of what this is going to look like and be consistent. I think about Gary Vaynerchuk. He put up a video on Wine Library every day for 5 years, and now look at him. You can't argue with his success, but I'm pretty sure he didn't have the success right out of the gate. That was 5 years in the making, a video every single day. And then the third thing is that you've got to, as I said earlier, educate, or you've got to entertain, and you've got to figure out some kind of trope, some kind of mechanism to stand out, because there's just too many people out there that are creating user-generated videos. So what can you do to set yourself apart? And I think part of that is really studying the trends on TikTok, or studying the trends on Reels. What are the trending sounds? What twist can you offer on that?
I hear doing a video every day for 5 or 10 years, and I think I don't have that kind of patience. I want to be one of these people that they blow up, right? They have a few videos, they get millions of followers, they go viral, they go crazy, and I think most people hear like, oh, 5 or 10 years every day. I don't have time for that. I'm trying to run a business.
100%. But here's what I've learned. Like, I had to get out of my own way when it comes to perfectionism. Like, I'm usually done up like this, dressed up, doing my videos. And I realized that the videos that actually got more play and more reaction were the ones that I did on my way back from the gym at 7 a.m, where I'm just talking and walking. People, that brand of television or video content where things are not perfect, but the audio is perfect, or the content might be compelling, is what people are drawn to.
So something still has to be perfect. The audio or the content, something has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all of it.
Right. Well, people are less forgiving of bad audio, but they are not forgiving of some other things. Right.
I know what you're saying. So then when you mentioned Reels, you mentioned TikTok. Like, TikTok feels to me all of a sudden it's had its moment in the past 12 months. Like, it's like, all right, It's here, everyone's on it. I got on it to do my old insurance startup. I mean, it started to become this thing, but now it's like, okay, what's the next thing? There's always the next thing. I don't know if Clubhouse or Discord is that, but when you're looking at the details, or is it still TikTok is the place to go if someone is trying to get started and they want to get branding for their business? Is it go back to IG Reels? Is it YouTube Shorts? Is it some new platform? What are you saying?
I just read that Nerf, which is, I think, owned by one of the bigger toy companies, has appointed a chief TikTok officer. And I've heard that more than once, but here's the philosophy behind that. Because I went down a deep rabbit hole in investigating this. Okay. The majority of the people that are on TikTok are 13 years old and younger. Fair enough. And younger. I thought finally had gotten more to people our age that had taken over from the kids. Fair enough. But I'm saying the majority of the consumer of that audience is 13 years and younger. And people are like, well, why do I, as a Fortune 500 company, need to be on TikTok? Well, guess who's going to pull the trigger if you are going to buy that next toy? It's not going to be the kid. It's going to be the parents. So the kid has to persuade the parent to be able to go out and buy stuff. So that is where the rubber hits the road. That's where a Nerf needs to figure out how to be engaging on a TikTok medium, because that's where the kids are. That's where the engaged audience is. And they're the ones that are going to eventually grow up to become the next wave of consumers. I will add on to that I moderated a summit for Darden Restaurants, which of course owns Taco Bell and Pizza Hut and a couple of other things. And esports is another arena where big companies are advertising. But here's what was interesting about a Pizza Hut is that they looked at the numbers, and the average person that's on an esports platform, Twitch, you name it, spends about $75 on fast food versus the average consumer. So why wouldn't you go after that customer? They are exactly your target customer. Because that's such a stereotype, right? It's like, oh, the person sitting on video games is just overeating fast food, right? But they're spending a lot of money on it. So why wouldn't you? You have a captive audience there. They're not, for the longest time, they weren't in stadiums. So what were you going to do? That's where you could go for a captive audience. That's crazy. So I want to shift to another thing that's really big for you, boundaries. You've talked a lot about the importance of setting boundaries, having them, being able to defend them. How did you get involved in that as a real main area for you to focus on? As I said, since I've been on my own since I was 18, so I really had to learn by observing other people. And I realized that I came from a culture where women were rewarded for their selflessness. They were not rewarded for putting themselves first. So where in the world was I going to call any kind of boundary setting language which becomes penultimate when you become a business owner and the busier that you get? So I really needed to make sure that I had scripts that were tucked away in my back pocket that I could pull out in real time when I have my back up against the
Do
wall.
you mean work, like a work boundary, a friend boundary, a social boundary? What kind of boundaries?
Hey, I charge $10,000 to be able to speak at your company. Well, we're really only going to pay like 3,000. Okay, so that's a no. But how do I gracefully say no without burning the bridge? Those kinds of boundaries are the ones that I feel like I'm being pushed on. Or, we really would love to give you exposure. Why don't you come and speak at this thing? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I unfortunately have to decline. Boom, done. I don't need to go down the rabbit hole of explaining to you why. The answer is no. No is a sentence. And now, since we're going into the holidays, I'm finding, again, I'm in front of my membership all week long. I'm on calls with them all week long. And boundaries, whether it's with a client, whether it's with a coworker, whether it's with their boss, comes up constantly. How do I say no? And so I did a series just last week on boundaries that you can establish with your loved ones during the holidays, especially if you're not going home for Christmas, or if you have serious health concerns about being around a large crowd and it's not something that you want to do. But I mean, I think any of those scripts can be transposed into a work situation or otherwise. But no is a complete sentence. But if that comes across as too harsh, unfortunately, I can't make it happen this year, or I hear you, so that you're giving empathy to the person that you are disappointing. And I also believe that you have to be early in managing people's expectations. Let them process the disappointment, but be specific, be convicted in why you're saying what you're saying, and then you just let it lie.
That's fascinating. I'm listening to that thinking, I want to hear some of these other scripts. Give me some other examples. What are some common scenarios that some of your membership asks about that maybe they want practice working on these answers?
So do you watch that show Succession on HBO? I mean, I think that is the ultimate.
I haven't seen that show. I'm buried in 3 little kids at home, so I haven't been able to see it.
I just recently got hooked on it. But, it centers around a Rupert Murdoch Trump-like family drama. And the father is is very much like the tyrannical figure. He runs the company, he runs the lives of his children. And they have a hard time saying no to dad. And I have a lot of women who have a hard time saying no to in-laws or to their mother or to whatever. And so just an example script. Okay, you've decided you are not going home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Number one, you have to be 100% clear about the decisions that you're making. So write all your reasons down. My trainer, for example, she's got a young teenage daughter. She's a single mother. She doesn't want to have to hear all the judgment about being a single mother and the choices that she's made. She also just went home a week ago and doesn't feel comfortable when she services clients all week long, 6 days a week, getting any of them sick. She also is just tired. She works 6 days a week. What if she could develop some traditions with her own daughter, just stay home and rest and recharge? So then what does that mean for mom who's expecting her to come home again for, Thanksgiving or Christmas? Early and often, I've made the decision, train it on I, not you. I have made the decision that I'm going to be staying home for Christmas this year. And if you get negotiation or pushback, you have to, again, not leave that room open. Like, I understand, I hear you, but this is, what I need to do. Or if you are staying over at someone's house, making sure that you have an end time. You're not going to be there till till Sunday. Sorry, we're going to, I just want to have a verbal conversation with you that we are coming from 9 to 3. The kids are bringing their sleeping bags. We're going to leave at 3:15. And then you follow up with an email to make sure there's documentation of the fact that you agreed on this. So there's no room for negotiation or pushback afterwards. This is what we talked about.
Yeah, this is really powerful, especially during the holidays, because we all know so many people who are in these awkward family situations, and I don't really want to go, but I feel obliged to go, or there's a lot of obligations and hard feelings. And then people show up, and then there's a huge, massive blow up that maybe they would have been better off having that 1-minute conversation, saying no in a polite way that would have avoided things that maybe would have been better for everybody if they didn't do.
And we all know right now a big flashpoint is who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated. Right. And that becomes a big political topic. So I've had friends, I'm Indian, so Diwali's coming up, and now a lot of people are really kvetching about what's going to happen at, this person's vaccinated, that person's not vaccinated, or confronting people who are not vaccinated at parties. And it really becomes uncomfortable for a lot of people who are involved in that conversation. So a simple, saying ahead of time, my relationship status or my vaccination status is off limits this year. We're not talking about that. And if it makes people uncomfortable, then I'm making a different choice. Maybe I stay in a hotel, and then you and I need to figure out when we can spend some quality time together, because I really value our relationship.
So everything you're saying here, it brings up a question. You don't have to answer it. You can say no. But I think about what you're talking about when you left home at 18 and you paid for college yourself, grad school for yourself. You didn't do what your parents wanted you to do.
Yeah.
What was that like relationship-wise? Did you stay in touch with them afterwards? Was there many years of being disconnected? How did you personally deal with, I'm going to go out on my own?
Well, the other piece of my personal story is that I was also born into a home of domestic violence. So I also saw the repercussions for women using their voice or having an opinion. So that was another thing that kind of forced me out of the nest, because I knew that better had to be outside of my home, and better, I didn't know what better looked like, but at a very young age, but I knew I needed to leave in order to forge that for myself. So I think that that was like another piece of why I could keep moving forward and not look back, because I didn't want that for myself. That being said, to answer your question, my father and I did not speak for the last 15 years before he died. And it's, again, like I was just not living up to his scripts on what girls do. They don't move to New York City on their own. They don't date whoever they want to date. They don't go off and do whatever they want to do, live life on their own terms. I really think that he expected me to come back, and I didn't. I just kept moving forward. And so I think that mine is just like an outlier case. I don't think that's the family dynamic for most. I think my mom and I have a very touch and go relationship via Facebook right now, but it's hard. She comes from a different culture. And so we are always at loggerheads, because I have different ideas, because I was raised in a very Western concept and Western milieu, where there's emotional intelligence and there's picking up on social cues and you act accordingly. And I feel like her and I just never have seen eye to eye. And that really, it's not her fault. She's doing the best that she can with what she's got, because she came from a different culture.
Right. She was born in a different country, in a different continent, in a different decade, different generation than you are. So it makes sense you'd have different experiences. So it leads me to what's on the screen right now, Women's Leadership Academy, right? The word women is in there. And for all the reasons you explained, why that's been so important to you, given how you were raised and your background. But then I'm hearing you're accepting male students for the first time right about now. So are you changing it to the People's Leadership Academy? What's happening here? Why are you opening it up?
No, I'm opening up my public speaking masterclass to men for the first time.
Okay, so only the public speaking masterclass, only that part.
But here's an important reason why. Another piece of my very conservative upbringing is that I wasn't allowed to talk to boys. I wasn't allowed to play with the little boys across the street. Again, very conservative scripts growing up in an Indian household. And so lo and behold, all of a sudden now I'm in college, and guess what? 50% of the population is male, and I didn't know how to talk to them. I needed to learn that. I had to observe other people and learn how to do that. And now, of course, given that I've had a career on Wall Street, guess what? Most of my counterparts were male. And I remember going to a Glenlivet Scotch tasting so that I had something else with which to engage my male counterparts that wasn't just work. I could talk about Scotch. I could talk about cigars. So I'm just saying that we live in a world where, yes, it's nice to stay in a safe container of just women only. And God knows I've done it for the last 10 years. But at the end of the day, the majority of our corporations, a lot of our organizations are run by men. And we need to learn the art of dealing with them. And the way I had to learn the art of dealing with them and negotiating with them and talking to them and bartering with them. So I think it's time to start to introduce that. It's an experiment for my November cohort of my public speaking masterclass. But I want to see. I want to see how the dynamic is maybe the same or different.
That's fascinating. It brings up a good point, because it reminds me of my own, experiences as a kid and a young adult. Like, I don't know how to talk to girls. Like, I don't know what to do with them. Like, we grew up in a very similar, I was in a strict household too, where it's like, you stay away from the girls. So you and I would have stayed on opposite sides of the street, not playing with each other.
Literally.
That is a good point. I think about people that, let's say they go to only like a girls' school or a boys' school, and you wonder about that. Like, now as a parent, I wonder, is it better for my kids to go to a single sex school, or is it better to just go to co-ed public school? What sets them up better for the future? And you could say these pros and cons either way.
Yeah. I mean, I have friends who send their kids to private schools and charter schools and all that. And I think at the end of the day, the impetus behind that, I'm sure some of it has to do with keeping their kids out of trouble. But I think it's really about the network they're going to glean from being in those kinds of social situations. So I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to the network that you build.
Right, right. And then the last thing before we go is, when you look back at the time you spent interviewing CEOs, being on the New York Stock Exchange, hearing companies try to tell their stories, who did you find was doing a good job telling their story versus a lot of CEOs? I think you and I would know, they're stuck in jargon, they're stuck in industry language. They're not really reaching the mass audience. You know, most shareholders and investors, they don't really know that much about the company. It's like, I like the brand, I like the CEO, I like management, but I couldn't tell you, like, if I bought Boeing stock, I can't tell you how to make a plane. Like, I don't know how to make an iPhone. Like, I don't know how Netflix works. You know, the reasons we buy these stocks is actually so different from what the CEOs themselves know. So what did you notice in that storytelling translation?
Well, first of all, most CEOs are well trained to give the answer they want to give versus the answer to the question you're actually asking. And so I think that's point number one. I remember interviewing the CEO of Vimeo, and she had just come back from having a child. And the question on the table was, how do you balance both? And she's like, listen, there are days that I'm going to be a bad mother, and there are days that I'm going to be a bad employer or a bad employee, but those two things can't coexist. And I appreciated her vulnerability, and I appreciated her honesty in that moment, as opposed to giving me the canned answer that somebody probably told her to say. I would say the same for the CEO of Diane von Furstenberg. I interviewed her, and the same thing. She made a choice to get divorced and raise her 3 kids on her own. And again, it came back to the issue of, okay, I'm going to concede to the fact that my children are going to be raised by nannies because I want my children to see that I live a life that I'm passionate about, as opposed to one where I'm just going in and punching the clock. So I think some of the women CEOs have been really inspirational to me because they were willing to be vulnerable.
Joya, this has been fascinating. I know you're busy there on the road. You got a lot to do. Joya, I really appreciate the conversation. This has really been eye-opening in the way your personal story has directly impacted what you've done and now the work that you're doing to help others. It's really fascinating.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's great to connect with you again.
All right, that was our guest, Joya Dass, today from the Women's Leadership Academy. After a long career on broadcast media, on Wall Street, on TV screens, all over the country, all over the world. Joya, we really appreciate the time. And thanks for listening to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chemi. We'll see you next time.